You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for the show. And, of course, after a little bit of a rough start, we had a few technical issues. We're here, we're live with you guys, and we're going to do some ranking tonight. Live ranking, actually.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about how this is going to work. There are 10 animated shows that have been put out over the years. Now, that's what I can find. If you guys know of any other ones, let us know. Certainly in the comment section, you can let us know, here. The only one that I had omitted was what was it? Howard. I never.
Clone Wars shorts?
No, the dude that did the Clone Wars shorts. I can never remember, Kurosawa or something like that. It was like some like anime thing. And even though those were cool, I didn't count those. Just because, they were just so short.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about shows that actually were a real series. All right, so to start things off, we got Ted Adam Green. Of course, he's here now, but he did say earlier, in case I don't make it, let me say this is a great topic. Rebels is my favorite, but that doesn't mean it's the best. That said, I have enjoyed all except Resistance. That I just couldn't get into. All right, well, that's totally fair. We understand that. Because, again, this is one of those things where not everybody is going to jump on board with every project, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a few that I'm sure you and I will talk about tonight that that we could definitely say that about, right?
Right.
So let's see. Let me get just one more in here. Bear with me. I just have to restart the social stuff. All right. So David says, hello, gentlemen. It's Star Wars Day. That it is. And not only is it Star Wars Day, it is ranking the animated shows day. So that's right. We are going to go through. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go through each of these. We're going to talk about them. And then finally, we're going to rank them. So this should actually be a pretty fun show tonight. So the first one that we're going to talk about actually is Droids. I don't know if you remember this one or not. They actually did they put it back on Disney Plus not too long ago, but I remember, where did I see it? I think when we were working at Oak Park, I actually brought, I don't know if I found it like on YouTube or something, but I think I brought something in.
You found it on YouTube, and we watched a couple of little things on YouTube.
Yeah, because
you were telling me about it, because I never saw this, obviously, because it's like 1 year old when this came out.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Yeah. This was, and it was a pretty crude. It's funny because when I went back and I watched it, it was a pretty crude series, but I was surprised at how well some of the stories translated. Because usually this kind of thing is made for kids. It's something that isn't really like the greatest thing. And that's sort of where I put Resistance, actually, too. Although I do like Resistance, and we'll talk more about that when it comes up. But yeah, this one, even though it did have some cheesy moments, and I remember even as a kid thinking, you know what? Are you going to have a series just based on R2 and 3PO?
Yeah, that is a weird concept. I wish I was really more aware of this show, growing up. Well, at least if it would have lasted longer, if they showed like the reruns, like they did some He-Man and
right. Well, like I said,
when I was a kid.
you can apparently you can access this on Disney Plus. I should go back and watch it because I remember the versions that I saw on YouTube. They were a little crude. Like, because of the, I'm sure it was probably uploaded from like a 12th generation VHS. Yeah, exactly. So, but I do remember that Droids had some cool stories and it held up. Whether it makes her top 5,
Yeah.
Probably not, but worth mentioning nonetheless. This is another one of the ones from the 80s that came out right after the original trilogy. The Ewoks. I remember the live action series. To be honest, I don't know if I ever watched this. Did you ever
This
see
looks like
this?
no, this looks like the Bernstein Bears meet the Smurfs or something.
It really does. It totally has that kind of vintage, almost Hanna-Barbera animation style to it.
Oh, absolutely. Like you could
Um,
this is coming on right after Yogi.
well, it's just weird to me that for some reason, I don't know what it is that Lucas was thinking, but he zeroed right in on the Ewoks. I mean, he came up with the whole Ewok Adventures, and then there was that second live action Ewok Adventures thing. I forgot what it was. I forgot. I think they had two slightly different titles,
Mhm.
or maybe there was one series and a couple of 2-hour TV movies or something like that. But I don't 100% remember the animated show. I remember it coming out, but I don't, like I said, I don't think I ever saw this. And clearly you probably didn't either.
Mm-mm.
I don't even know if this one is available on Disney Plus or not. It might be. If you guys know, maybe you're watching this live, let us know in the comments, or certainly if you're, watching this afterwards, you can always let us know whenever, even if it's like a year from now. We still check all the comments. But yeah, this one's another interesting one. I think a lot of people forget about it, probably with good reason, I'm not going to lie. So that's that one. And then this one's a more recent one, but again, I don't know if I've ever seen this one.
Yeah, me either. I've never, and well, because I couldn't even get through Resistance. I mean, I know this definitely probably was like, okay, this is for the same reasons why I couldn't get through Resistance. This is probably why I didn't watch this one.
Well, I
This is
mean,
this is something I would see like David's son, D3. I could see him watching this and being all into it, and that's perfectly fine because I feel like that's who it will be made for. Like maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 year old. That's the wheelhouse for this show.
oh, 100%. I mean, if you think about it, and this is one of the criticisms that I have with a lot of fans, is that for some weird reason, they can't accept the fact that Star Wars was originally made for children.
Right.
And because of that, there's going to be some shows that are geared strictly towards kids. And of course, yeah, if you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever, you're probably not the audience for a show like this one. So, I mean, I know I've never seen it. Now, I do like, and this is another thing that we didn't include, there's a lot of Lego Star Wars specials that have come out over the last 5 years or so, or longer,
Mhm.
really. I didn't count any of those either, but it would seem, even though those actually appeal to an older audience as well, I think that something like this, yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's some cool canon in it. Who knows? But I don't think either one of us, like, we're not going to do the Young Jedi Adventures review show. You
Yeah,
imagine?
absolutely
Like,
not.
nobody would be watching us do that. Unless, of course, people had kids. I don't know. I shouldn't say nobody. There's an audience for everybody out there, right? Okay. Your favorite Visions. But you have to
Mhm.
admit that with season 2, it was a lot stronger than season 1, and you did find yourself enjoying a lot more of the episodes.
Indeed. I must admit that. As painful as it is. But yeah, I think Visions was I mean, I think the concept of it is cool. Like the idea of a bunch of different animation studios taking their own more or less liberty or spin and putting their own spin on Star Wars with their type of animation and storytelling. I think it's cool. I mean, obviously, definitely some stories translate better than others, and they're easier to get into. But if you're a huge anime fan, if you like a lot of avant-garde type of anime type, stuff, this is definitely, you know, a good show for you. I think. But um, yeah, it's definitely not going to be. Yeah.
It's not going to be in your rotation, I have a feeling.
Oh no.
Well, except for the fact that we review it.
Exactly. That's the only reason why.
But I would
it's
stake
rotation.
my life savings, as small as that may be, I would still stake all of that on the fact that you have not rewatched a single episode of this show since we reviewed it.
Oh, you definitely went in the house on that one.
Yes. See, that's what I like to hear. And I mean, quite frankly, neither have I. And I think there was, particularly in season 1, I think there were things that I enjoyed probably more than you did. Season 2, I think we were pretty much in line. The only time that I think we differed in season 2 was, ironically, the premiere episode. Both of us admitted that it was just an animation tour de force. I mean, the animation in it was incredible. But your problem with it, if I remember correctly, was the story was cool, but it was just done in such a surreal way that it just lost you in a lot of places. You know, that was like that whole art girl and that Sith Lord was after or whatever. That was cool, but I do definitely think that even though season 2 probably was a lot more concise and it felt a little bit more like Star Wars. And the other thing where I think season 2 benefited was the fact that it actually had a lot of different animation studios from different countries.
Yeah.
And I think that really broadened the horizons of the show.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, to that degree, I don't know if or where it's going to rank in our top 5. But I will say that I am somewhat looking forward to season 3. I'm really curious on where they're going to go with this show and how they're going to further explore anime Star Wars, basically. So that's kind of cool. All right, now I think we're going to get into some stuff that is a little... This is where there's that balance, right? Where it's definitely made for kids with Star Wars Resistance, but at the same time, it does have some deep canon stories in it. Particularly season 2, which was the last season, overlaps with The Force Awakens. And I thought that was pretty cool. Like, they're listening to Hux's speech that was being broadcast from Starkiller Base.
Mm-hmm.
And there were characters that I actually enjoyed in this, but it's funny. And it may have hit you the same way, because you said you couldn't even really finish it. I was almost there a couple of times, I have to admit. But I forced myself to do it.
No pun intended.
But I mean, as it went on and it had the story of how the pirates were attacking their little outpost or whatever it was, this is another show that was very similar to Rebels in a way, where it started out a little silly and a little goofy, and you're just kind of like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to get through this or not. And then the story started to get a lot more weighty. You know, they basically started to tackle some more adult themes. They were presenting the shows in a little bit more of an adult way. But unfortunately, I think that if you couldn't get to that point, you're never going to see that. And admittedly, it was tough at times because, again, and they said this from the outset. They said, look, this is geared towards little kids, right? We're talking like under 10 years old. And so there is a little bit of that, you know, silly, kid-like humor. And I don't know, it might have been hard. How far did you make it through? Do you remember?
Ooh, I definitely didn't make it to season 2. So I'm probably maybe 3 to 4 episodes in the season 1, maybe.
Okay, perfect. So what you're saying is you'd like to actually review this show then?
Oh no, absolutely not.
Come on, we could do like a whole Resistance Visions marathon.
Oh god,
It'll be, oh yeah, right.
That's like waterboarding.
It really is. I know. You know what? I mean, some of the stuff. I mean, as bad as the Acolyte may have been, at least you could get through it, and it did have some redeeming qualities. Although, again, Resistance, if you actually just
I want to
stuck
try it
through it,
again though. I'm going to
try it
try it
again
again.
because it.
Just
Here's the
because you keep
problem.
saying that, so I'm like,
Well,
okay, I'm
and
going to
here's the
try it.
thing. The problem is it's not so much that the show is bad. It's just geared for really little kids. And
Right,
that's the tough part to get through.
right.
But if you do, you're actually rewarded, especially towards the end of season 1. I mean, honestly, it gets a little dark in season 2 especially. So just, try to wade through it. And again, I don't remember, like, the episodes are only like 20, 30 minutes or something. I mean, I don't think they were that long.
I'm gonna make a promise right here on the show.
Ooh.
By by next Monday, by a week from now, I would have watched both seasons.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. All right. All right. Well, David says Visions was horrible. All the animation except one episode was trash. And I don't know who they hired, but they have no imagination. The episodes were disappointing, given a great concept. All right. Now, I know if I remember correctly, David is an anime fan, right?
Yes, he's more I don't know how deep into anime. I mean, he's into the Dragon Ball Z stuff, but
Oh, well,
outside of
that's
that, I don't.
not. Yeah, that's not
I
really.
mean,
That's
yeah. Well, hey, listen,
that's
that's
basically
that's a
the
world. That's a world that I don't even
dude.
really
Dragon
meddle
Ball
in.
Z. That's pretty much that's like your first level of anime right there. That's
Exactly.
like everybody. You know how like everybody knows Jay Z, but that doesn't
Hmm.
mean you're into rap.
Exactly.
It's like sure if you can name a few popular artists, big deal. But speaking of which, something that came across, this is completely unrelated to what we're talking about, big shock. But speaking of anime, one of the ones that I started watching that's actually really cool, and I forgot which studio did this, but there's an anime version of the Terminator now called Terminator Zero. It's on Netflix.
Hmm.
That's really cool, and it's extremely it's stylistic, but it's not so stylistic that it would lose people. Another one that I would recommend is the ongoing Ultraman series. They basically came up with a new anime version of that that's also amazing. But all right, I digress. I don't want to get too far out track because we want to do this ranking. All right, so the next series. This is where we start to really get into the stuff that we actually like. So this one is Tales of the Empire. Now, Tales of the Empire, I thought that the structure was cool, where the first half they focused on Barasafi. Was it? No, it was what's her name? Oh man. I keep wanting to say Elsbeth. Morgan Elsbeth.
Yeah. Oh, you tell Tales of the Empire, yes.
Yeah, Tales of the Empire. So Tales of the Empire, the first, I don't know, what was it, like 8 episodes, and like the first 4 focused on her, and then Barasafi was like the second 4.
Hmm.
I thought that was actually a cool way of doing things. However, and chime in on this, but I didn't think it was quite as strong as Tales of the Jedi.
No, I don't think the stories were as compelling. I think it's, um, but I do enjoy the structure of Tales of the Empire. One of the things I really love about it is because you can kind of delve a little bit deeper and go into like it's almost kind of taking like one particular character, you isolate them, and you can kind of just go into it like we saw with Tales of the Jedi, and I would just I kind of lump these two together, even though they're I guess you may want to call them two separate shows. I mean, Tales of the Empire and Tales of the Jedi. I think I will combine them together, and that's why I would just call them Tales. Um, but the one they did with Count Dooku was amazing because we got a
Right.
whole lot of story about him, heretofore that we didn't know before. So I think that was really, and to see like his seduction into the dark side, I think that was really awesome. We knew that he was a master of Qui-Gon, and and he was revered in the Jedi Order, so I thought that was really done. But the one with Barris Offee, uh it was cool. Like I said, I think that they expanded that storyline from Clone Wars, which was, awesome. And then the Morgan Elsbeth character, I think that was cool because we got a little bit more of that from because she was initially introduced to us in The Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're getting some more detailed. So I mean, I appreciate the world building that they did. Even though Tales of the Empire wasn't as compelling as Tales from the Jedi, I still think it was a phenomenal show.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the thing that you have to understand about this. You're absolutely right. This is like two sides of the same coin,
Hmm.
and it's world building. It's a lot of world building. It's a lot of doing what I've always wanted them to do in Star Wars and what often the comics do. And that is they'll take an established story and then they'll give us either like the other side of it, or maybe it's through the lens of a different character, or they'll just fill in the gaps that the movies and some of the books and things like that can't cover. So from that standpoint, it's really good. But I just felt that, much like what you're saying, that Tales of the Jedi just it nails it. And in fact, we might as well just go ahead and roll into that too, right? Because
Hmm.
like you said, they are more or less the same thing. It makes me wonder where they're going to go next if they do another one, because I actually thought they were going to do Tales of the Jedi season 2, and then they came up with Tales of the Empire. So it's like, are they going to do Tales of the Bounty Hunters, Tales of the Smugglers? I mean, Tales of the Huts? I don't know.
Well, I mean, what I think would be really cool is that if they just kept it as those two and just flip flop. To me, that would be the better option, in my opinion. So you want to do Tales of the Jedi? Okay, well, we did Empire last. We're going back to Jedi. We picked two more Jedi that we want to explore a little bit more. Like Mace Windu a little will be a good one because even though we saw a little bit of his within Count Dooku's story, seeing him now more like okay, his ascension into the basically the number two in the Jedi Council will be awesome to see. How did he get to that point? Um, and then you can spawn off again with the Tales of the Empire. Fine, do a story on Hux or do a story on there's so many different people that you could flip flop between those two entities. I think you could really tell some awesome stories in that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, when you're actually looking at Tales of the Jedi and Tales of the Empire, I think it's also important to note the characters that they chose to focus on, like Barriss Offee, right? I mean, you could
Hmm.
almost spin that into a Tales of the Jedi story.
True.
I mean, granted, it's her being, wanting revenge, or just feeling like she wants to join the dark side now because, what are the Jedi going to do? I mean, I thought that was a really cool story where they basically said, okay, the Jedi that weren't wiped out by Order 66, well, what are they
No
going to
choice.
do? Are you going to let them join the Empire if they wanted to? Because if you think about it, that would have really been an attractive thing. Now you have this army of Jedi, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the idea was they ended up becoming Inquisitors.
Yeah, they were trying to make them inquisitors, and that's where she was, getting trained by the Grand Inquisitor. And he kept saying, like, you're thinking like the reason why I beat you because you're thinking like a Jedi.
Yeah.
You have to unlearn yourself as a Jedi and think, differently. Um, but yeah, I thought that was once again, I thought that was really compelling. And you really put yourself in that position, and you're like, okay, look, I could be put to. I mean, I could have been killed. I could be still be put to death, or I could join the Empire, which is once again the legitimate government at the time. So,
Hmm.
from a certain point of view, I'm fighting for my country or my right. If you want to put it that way. Um, but at the same time, that they're evil and they're doing just a bunch of atrocities. and at your core and at your heart, now that you've had some time to recant your actions, you have some remorse for what you've done. So now you still have that tug of, much like Kylo, do I go to the light or do I stay dark? Like, what do I do?
Right. Right. All right. So David's got a few comments, unsurprisingly. The first one is, y'all just hate me. First Fast and Furious and now Dragon Ball Z. Mr. Vansel, Dragon Ball Z is the best anime of all time. Okie dokie. Remember that Ronaldo also feels like The Last Jedi is probably the best Star Wars movie of all time. Everybody, it's subjective.
Yeah.
Hey, man, if Dragon Ball Z, it's like,
thing.
Look, McDonald's is popular, right? People like McDonald's. I
mean
wouldn't
it's
say
healthy.
McDonald's is the best, but everybody knows it. And it's, it's not like it's bad. It's just, you got to dig in, man. All I'm saying is, with your anime, just dig in. Go for Fist of the North Star. Go for Vampire Hunter D. Go for, oh man, there's like so many of them. I could just rattle them off, but I'm not going to. This is not an anime show. He goes on to say, Tales of the Empire was very enjoyable. Wow, something he likes. Awesome. This animation was good. I really liked the last episode fight scene. Actually, all the fights were very cool, which is what Star Wars should be. Cool. And actually, that's something that I strongly agree with as well. In fact, I think when you and I reviewed that, we talked about how this is the kind of thing that Star Wars needs to do more, right? They need to explore some of these stories, and the way in which they did it was really, really cool. Really cool. And so my hope is that they continue to follow suit. Now, whether you're right and maybe they flip-flop between, so now that we've had Tales of the Empire, now maybe we get Tales of the Jedi Volume 2 or Season 2 or whatever they want to call it. Fantastic. All right, so let's move on to our next one. Star Wars Rebels. This is another one that I remember when you and I were watching it, like the first couple of episodes, we're like, it's okay. Not 100% in love with this yet, but it's okay. And then it just really got good. And I mean, I think that that's something that happened with the Clone Wars too, actually, was that each season was better than the previous one until now. It's just so mind-blowingly good.
Yeah, it's kind of like an avalanche, like a snowball.
Yeah.
That just kind of, picks up speed as it starts as this little pebble, and then it's before it's gained so much mass, and this thing is really hard to stop, and it's really going, and it's a phenomenal show. And I think here's the thing when I look at animations, and this is kind of how I'll just say for my ranking, like this is how I'm going to judge a lot of different things. I look at the characters, the character development. Are they interesting characters? And then do they build out the world? And are the stories compelling? Do we care about these characters? Are we invested in them? Those things. And then what's the overall, like, what are we trying to get to? What's the overall goal? And I think that's kind of how I'm going to be looking at when it's time to actually sit and rank a lot of the stuff. That's my rubric or criteria that I'm looking at. And Rebels did a masterful job at this. Like you said, it started off a little like, okay, what are we doing? And then boom, it's just
and look, and
exploding.
It should be noted here that both series, even though they got progressively better, both Rebels and the Clone Wars did dip a little at times, right? Like Space Whale storyline in Rebels was a little like, okay. And then, of course, the droids getting lost and find their way home in the Clone Wars that when it seemed to go on forever.
Yeah, it was like 3 weeks or...
Yeah, at least. There's at least 3 or 4 episodes. And so, yeah, you get peaks and valleys. But that's really true for anything. Usually it's season-wide. I will say this, for both Rebels and the Clone Wars, they definitely did a really good job at not doing to where the dips and everything were like a whole season, right? I mean,
Hmm.
each season did get progressively better than the previous season, even though you did have a couple of story arcs that maybe you weren't in love with. A lot of times you can overlook that and go, okay, the bigger story arc, the bigger picture, that is actually worth watching. And you stayed invested in the show, even
Yeah.
though you're like, I don't know. I don't know. We'll have to see. All right. So that's Rebels. And then of course we have the Bad Batch. You gotta love the Bad Batch. It's another one of those
Yeah.
shows that I would say pretty much the same thing. I mean, sure, it didn't go as many seasons, but each one I think got progressively better.
Yeah, this is a show that, if you recall, Eric, I didn't even think we needed this show. I was
No,
like,
you didn't. I know.
I
I
didn't
know.
like, this is stupid. Why are we doing a whole, season on, I mean, I thought it was cool when they put it into the Clone Wars thing. I was like, all right, that was a cool, but then the fact that they decided to give them their own series, I'm like, really? What's the story here? And man, was I ever wrong? And I was pleasant. I was happy to be wrong, in that situation. This was a great, great, great show. I mean, again, looking at my rubric, even though, and I have to give credit to the voice actor, because there's one guy who voiced all these guys.
Yeah.
It's five people on here basically, and he voiced them all. The thing is, though, he was able to create personalities out of all these different characters and give them their own, individuality, and you kind of like, it became like a group of friends that you kind of wanted to hang out with and see, like, okay, what's the Bad Batch doing this week? And I really thoroughly enjoyed this show.
Yeah, this was another one of those shows that, again, both of us, I remember when it was first announced, both of us were saying, do we really need this show?
Hmm.
I mean, they were basically, I mean, don't get me wrong, it was a fairly strong story arc when they were introduced in the Clone Wars.
Right.
And I mean, it was okay, but I was kind of like, does it really need a whole show, though? I mean,
Exactly.
are we
Yeah.
really? But again, it just goes to show you how much depth there is in this universe. I mean, you could take these characters and you can create a whole world around them. But by the time they met Sid, and then of course Omega was with them, and you have her development, there's just a lot to this show. And if you think about it, they did quite a bit in a very short period of time. What did this thing go? Like 3 seasons?
Yeah.
So in 3 seasons, they managed to really go in depth. And of course, some of the later episodes where you had oh, what's that doctor guy's name? Why can't I think of his name?
Oh,
The main dude.
wait, the oh wait, are you talking about the doctor, the
Not the
Imperial?
woman, the main guy,
Oh,
the main bad guy,
I know you're talking about.
the
Oh
glasses.
crap.
Why can't I think of the guy's name? This is so stupid. This is why. This is why I need to research these things before we go live.
Well, we live in a world where everybody likes authenticity. So
Well, we're authentically stupid. We're not stupid, we just don't remember anything. We're authentically old, let's put it that way.
yeah,
I
I'll
mean,
give
it's
you
like it's
that.
an easy name too.
Hemlock.
Hemlock. Yes. There you go. So
Yes.
he was a very compelling villain.
Hmm.
And when they got into the whole project here we go.
Necromancer.
Yes.
See,
Correct.
I got that one.
There you did. You got that one. That was good. When they got into all that, that was where they were really starting to get into the meat of what this whole thing was going to be about. And again, one of the things that was really great about the Bad Batch was they could have kept it at a simple adventure story. They could have just had Sid giving these guys missions. They go out, they complete the missions, and honestly, that would have been okay. I mean,
Hmm.
it wouldn't have been what it was, because I think what the Bad Batch actually was a nice bridge and a little bit of foreshadowing to what we get later on, particularly with Palpatine. So, expertly done. All right, what do we got next? Oh, yes, of course, the Clone Wars.
Clone Wars. Yes. Yes.
We
The
both sigh
Clone.
at the same time.
This was really. I mean, you want to talk about a master class of animation and storytelling and world building. My goodness. I mean, I don't really know where I want to start with it, but I'm gonna just go. I guess I can kind of go from the kickoff since this show originally was kicked off in the theaters. We got the first what two episodes, two or
Two
three
episodes.
episodes,
Well,
two
yeah, it was
episodes,
no, it was two because they basically made it like it was a movie.
a movie. Yeah, they
Yeah.
made it turned into a film, and that introduced it. And then we started getting um seasons of Clone Wars, and we saw the growth of so many different characters. We saw expansion, world building, the furtherance of the whole Star Wars saga. I mean, there are just so many layers that's in Clone Wars. If you really haven't watched all of it, I mean, you're really doing yourself a disservice if you truly really don't want to understand Star Wars. Um, this is one of those shows where I say it's almost like a must if you really want to like I said, truly understand it, because you see the growth. I mean, we really literally watched almost like a kid grow up in front of us in Ahsoka. We watched Anakin, have the challenge of, taking on a Padawan and becoming a teacher and realizing, oh, this is harder than what he thought it would be. And, now he's realizing his own errors when he was, Obi-Wan's Padawan. We see the resurgence of Darth Maul, furtherance of that story, how he's, chasing after, Kenobi and um, him taking over, Crimson Dawn and all this. We see the Mandalorians come back. That's introduced. I mean, and that's just really basically what all you see in this picture right here. But there's still so much, we see a lot of things with Yoda and Mace and Plo Koon as far as him teaching Ahsoka stuff. And you just get so much Palpatine, uh him being a mastermind and watching him manipulate and pull strings. I mean, my goodness, man, it's really a like I said, I can't say another way, a master class in animation that if you really want to build out a world, Clone Wars, I mean, this is top tier.
One, I would say, just to add to that one of the advantages that the Clone Wars had, and it could have been a disadvantage, but it went 7 seasons, and with the exception of season 6, which was basically a compilation of unfinished episodes that they hurried up and
Mhm.
finished because that occurred right after Disney bought it, right? Because Lucas was about to make season 6, but then when Disney bought it, they held off on it. It wasn't shown on Disney XD at that point. I mean, it was just like they were in a transitional period. So with the exception of season 6, they were all like 22 episodes per season.
Mm-hmm.
And it went 7 seasons. So you had a lot. Now, the reason why I say that could be a disadvantage is because you run the risk of having filler at that point. A lot of times you will find that when you go long like that, and this happens in a lot of, especially older shows, when they used to do 22 seasons, not 22 seasons, 22 episodes.
Yeah.
They would do 22 episodes per season. And in a lot of cases, things would fall flat, right? Because you have budgetary limitations. I'm watching Talkville, which is a Smallville rewatch podcast with 2 of the stars, Tom Welling and Michael Rosenbaum, guy that played Clark, guy that played Lex. And the interesting thing about it is that sometimes they'll interview the creators on certain episodes or whatever. If you guys haven't seen it, it's a really fun show, by the way. They're on season 5 right now. But the thing that is interesting is how they'll talk about how writers sometimes have to build in cheaper episodes because you want to save the budget that you have for the season for some of the key episodes, like your premiere, your season finale, maybe like mid-season, like sweeps week or something like that. And so often you'll have these episodes that maybe take place in one room or whatever, or maybe it's just kind of cheap or whatever because they're trying to save money.
I never thought about that, but that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that they were talking about, and that's one of the traps of when you go like 22 episodes. The other thing that they talk about is sometimes you just get episodes that aren't good because the writers have just kind of dried up. You're on this constant, hamster wheel basically where you just have to keep creating all the time. And so you run the risk of maybe you're just losing it for a week or two and then you come back or you write yourself out of it. So going so many episodes can be a disadvantage. But in a lot of cases with the Clone Wars, again, there was a couple of story arcs where I'm like, okay, when is this thing going to end? But for the most part, I think it did pretty well, right? I would say that this is, like you said, a must watch because there's so much canon in it. It basically is the source material for virtually every other show that has come after it, whether it's live action or animation. In fact, the Clone Wars is to the new canon what Timothy Zahn's original novels were to the expanded universe. I will go ahead and make that claim. I'm Eric Vansel. I approve this message.
Oh man, hilarious. Yeah, no, this is like, to me, this is every season got better. It's kind of reminded me of one of our other favorite shows, 24.
Yep, exactly.
It just progressively got better and it advanced the world, the story of everything that's going on. And yeah, once again, you know how it's going to end, but the journey of getting there it's a ride, definitely.
All right. Well, you ready to have some fun with this?
Man, let's give them what they came for.
Let's give them what they came for. Let's do a live ranking of our favorite ones. Because again, we could have framed this as, hey, these are the top 5 best, series or whatever. But that's a little tough to do because the problem is that a lot of that's subjective. I mean, we could talk about it objectively, and objectivity is going to, I have a feeling it's going to factor into our discussion. So what we could do is on the bottom row here, we have all the shows. And we could talk about like, okay, where do we want to put them? Do we even want to include them on the list? There's 10 shows. There's 5 slots. So I think that we can safely, I'm sure, eliminate some. And I mean, honestly, I think the eliminated ones are going to be fairly easy. I think it's going to be when we get to maybe the top 3. Maybe the order. I have a feeling our number 1 would probably be the same, but 2
and 3 is probably going to be the hard one.
That might be the hardest, yeah. I think 2 and 3 might be the most difficult. And of course, you guys that are watching live, you can assist with this. We may not do anything about it, but you can actually assist with it. I mean, we might stand our ground. I don't know. Like, you want to rank them? Go start a YouTube show and rank them. But we will factor it in, though. We will factor it in. And of course, if you're watching after the fact, right? Like, it's not live. You just decided to watch this later. Then put in the comments section. If you guys, like, hey, I don't think that should have been number 2. This should have been number 2 or whatever. Be sure to comment on it. But I want to do more live rankings like this because I think this would be a lot more fun to do than just going through, hey, here's our top 5 list or whatever. Plus, this didn't come from Screen Rant. Just saying. Guys still tick me off. All right. So here we go. So the first one we got down there is droids. I'm going to go on a limb. This might be a stretch, but I'm going to say you're not going to want to put droids on the list.
No.
Okay, but why?
It's
going to be my number 1, dude, but whatever.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's no. I've never seen it. Well, I can't say never. I've seen a couple of episodes of it, but like it wasn't enough to be memorable. I don't think it really, again, based upon my criteria, I don't think it really advanced the story. I don't think that it built out a world that that really gave me a different perspective or showed me anything different. Um, yeah, I think this just it was done in the 80s, and I think at that time a lot of this telling the stories back then wasn't really necessarily the priority per se. I think it was just more just fun, lighthearted type stuff. It's but now we're in a different day and age where story really is king, and um, yeah, it just doesn't have it.
No, I would agree. I mean, I think the droids it's fun and there are some cool stories in it, but I don't think it necessarily holds up to the more modern ones. Not because of effects, not because of animation, not because of any of that, but just because the more modern versions are a lot more cinematic. They're larger in scope. I think that they do more for the canon.
Hmm.
That's another thing too that we should
Yeah,
probably
that's
factor
true.
in. Because I mean, a lot of the thing. Look, I mean, the criteria that you're using, I'm using. But I think another thing that we should do, because again, this is our collective top five.
Right.
That's why there's not two versions of these down here where we do our own rankings. I mean, it's going to be
Yeah.
what we think, right? All right, Ewoks. I'm sure you're probably thinking the same thing, right?
Same thing. Yeah.
Same thing.
Even less than the droids, actually.
Yeah, no, I would say the same thing. Visions.
No, because it doesn't. There's no. I mean, there's no cohesive story to it. Number one, I mean, barring my personal bias, like it's just it doesn't. If I'm just strictly going, objectively, um, it doesn't advance the story because everybody's telling a different story, so there's no consistency of characters and things of that nature. Um, sure, there were some cool stories that were told, and sure, there was some good animation here and there. However, I think that overall, like I said, it's to say it's uh, of the best. No, I think it's
Well, don't forget, this is our favorite. And
well favorites. Well,
that's
yeah,
the reason why I think more than anything, it probably isn't going to make, like, neither one of us are going to fight to put it on the list. Because you could, if you were going for, and again, it all goes on the criteria, right? Like, what are you basing this on? Are you saying, you know, top five best animation in Star Wars? It might actually go on the list for that because there is a lot of breathtaking animation in Visions. There's a lot of, I think that you could make the case to put it on a list, but not this one.
right.
Not this one. Star Wars Resistance. Boy, at this
Hmm.
rate, it's just gonna be down to like the
Yeah.
considering you didn't finish it,
Uh,
I'm gonna guess it's probably not gonna be on your
however, I will take into account that you did say that the world was you kind of built out the world a little bit. They added some canon into it with
Oh,
the
for
Hux
sure.
thing
Because
and,
I
and
mean,
some stuff.
even in the beginning, right? Oh,
I mean, they were talking about
what's the kid's name?
Poe
Yeah,
Dameron
Poe
and
was in it, and I mean, it was,
yeah,
there was a big connection there. So I mean,
yeah. So I mean,
there is
there's
stuff
some
there.
ties there. The animation wasn't bad at all
No, it was a
for
different
what it was.
style.
It's a different style, but for what it was, I mean, it's not my personal favorite, but I mean, it's for what they were trying to do. I get why they went there. Um, okay, let me before I make a decision. Are we putting are we combining Tails as one, or are we
Nope,
itemizing them? Ooh,
itemizing. They're two separate
okay. Well,
shows.
okay. Well, in that case,
You
yeah,
could,
cover
you
resistance.
could. I mean, I get the argument. You could technically
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
You could do that, but I mean, the problem is they're too different. Like, if you really look at them, they really are their own shows. They have a completely different style, the way that they did them. They have, because if you remember too, Tales of the Jedi had slightly different animation styles from episode to episode, where Tales of the Jedi or Empire didn't. The other thing is that Tales of the Jedi kind of went back and forth. There was that 3-episode Dooku story, but then it was bookended by like Ahsoka, and I forgot what the other one was. And
it was just Ahsoka and Dooku, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, but I mean, they kind of, it was different. Whereas Tales of the Empire is definitely its own thing. It's not like a continuation of them. However, if you really, 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 really want to do that, I mean, look at these long bars that are next to the number. Because these lists that are generated, they had like because normally the way that they do like these ranking lists is they'll have different criteria, right? So it's not necessarily like a top whatever. You can put them like you can grade them and things like that. That's why these lists, I think, are going to be a lot of fun for us to do, because you can do different criteria and say, okay, like we could have even taken these shows, for instance, even with this subject, right? We could have taken them and basically said, okay, let's categorically go through it. So like maybe you have a best animation, maybe you have a best story, maybe you have best, characters, something like that, and then you just put stuff wherever you want, But if you want to if you want to lump those two as one, we can do that. The question is, though, now where would you want to put it?
No, I mean, that's what I said. Like, let's just keep them separate. So I would say No Resistance.
So No Resistance, Young Jedi Adventures.
I can tell you no right now.
Yeah, somehow I didn't think that one was making the list.
Absolutely not.
All right, well, now we got Tales of the Empire.
Let's see. Hold on.
Well, just so you understand, from this point, there's only 5 shows left. We've already decided not to put any of the other 5 on. Right. So it has to go somewhere now.
Yeah.
I would make the argument.
I would say 5.
I would say 5 too. So let's go ahead and we're just going to put Tales of the Jedi, or I'm sorry, Tales of the Empire at number 5. All right. There it is. Tales of the Jedi, or Empire, is at number 5. Now we have Tales of the Jedi.
Yeah, it's going to 4.
Yeah, I could almost make an argument that this could, again, 2 and 3, I think is going to be the tough one for us. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's put Tales of
the Jedi. You can say it now.
Yes, thank you. Tales of the Jedi at number 4.
Now you can say it. You can't say it. It's hilarious.
I know. It's crazy. Well, keep in mind, I'm also like producing this entire show right now while I'm trying to host it. So that's part of the reason. All right. So now, what do we got down there? Rebels.
This is where it's going to get tough for me, man.
It's going to get tough because let's just do this. Are we just going to say that the Clone Wars is number 1?
Absolutely.
All right. Good.
It's the Master's Class.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's just get that out of the way right now. We're going to say the Clone Wars is number 1. All right. Clone Wars is number 1. So now it's going to be between Rebels and the Bad Batch. And now we have to figure out what's going to be number 2 and number 3.
This is where the debate comes in.
It does, because I mean, look, the temptation is probably to put Rebels at 2 and Bad Batch at 3, but I'm not
Yep.
100% sure that I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, because I think the stories are very well done in both. The characters are really fleshed out, um and there were some moments. I mean, like I could say, like the moment when we lost Tech, that actually hurt, man. Like
Yeah,
that
that's a good
hurt.
point. That was one of probably the saddest moments in Star Wars,
Yeah,
honestly. Like
yeah,
that
that
was
that one hurt.
brutal.
Um,
I mean, I guess you can, but then again, you know what though? A lot of people feel the same way about Kanan.
I was just about to say when Kanan, bought it, but it was kind of almost in the same kind of way, like it's in the sacrificial type of situation. Um, but then like watching like the growth of Omega versus the growth of Ezra, just I don't know, like because Rebels has some cool characters. I mean, like, look, we saw the return of Maul. We had a brief thing with Obi-Wan, of course. That seeing that duel
Well, and
again.
then I mean, just even speaking of Maul, right? You had the whole thing where Maul was trying to turn Ezra. You had that
Hmm.
whole story arc.
We got
I
the
mean, I
Bendu.
guess, yep. The only way that I could say that where I'm tempted to put Bad Batch at number 2 is because I think that the Bad Batch had less valleys. You know, it had less because if you think about this, when we first saw Rebels, like I said, we were like, okay, I don't know, man. If it keeps up like this, because it was a little silly in the beginning and it didn't capture us right away, whereas the Bad Batch did.
Hmm.
And I think the Bad Batch was a little bit more concise and tighter with its storytelling. I'm not saying that the Bad Batch didn't have some weak episodes,
Right.
but and again, Rebels also had an additional season. Now you can turn everything the other way, right? You can turn the tide the other way and you can say, look, Rebels also gave us the World Between Worlds. It gave us Vader.
Hmm.
It gave us Lando. You know, there was like a lot of these different things. If I'm not mistaken, I think the
Hondo.
Hondo was Hondo. No, he was introduced in Clone Wars.
Yeah, but I'm saying like
He
he was
showed
he
up in
was in.
Rebels. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Now I'm trying to remember if the Inquisitors were introduced in the Clone Wars or Rebels. That might have been
Uh,
Rebels.
yeah, Rebels.
So it gave us the
Well,
Inquisitors. Like that was actually birthed in the show.
hmm. But then, like, okay, when you look at the Bad Batch, though, going back to them, okay, we got the story of like, okay, Omega being the sister of Django. We also
Yeah.
got the whole betrayal with Crosshair and watching that whole story of you know basically they're bringing their brother back in, trying to trust him again, and he trusting them. Um, we got the story of watching watching Omega come into her own about trying to lead those kids out of that detention area. You know, we also got Project Necromancer, which also feeds into the sequel trilogy, which that can't be understated as well.
Well, that's what I mean too, right? There was a lot. You think of the Bad Batch being only 3 seasons, but there was a lot packed into that. And there
And
wasn't a whole lot of dead weight.
we saw young Kanan too.
Yeah.
Remember at the very beginning, like at the very
Yep.
beginning,
Yep.
when they were talking about Order 66 and they were watching that, and that was another thing too. It kind of continued the story, and like I said, it continued to build the world of and like them trying to get Omega's blood ties in with the Mandalorian, with the Grogu. That I mean, it's tough, man. Like I
Well, here's
really.
another thing too, and this is another thing that we liked. As soon as we started watching season 1, like the first few episodes, is
Mhm.
the fact that it really gave us a glimpse into the Republic now turning into the Empire,
Yes.
and how that
Yes.
was affecting a lot of former Republic people, right? Because it's like, well, what happens to the clones? Because remember, there was that whole like bill to save the
Yep.
clones and all that. That ties in a little bit with the Andor thing with Mon Mothma. Yeah, there's just like a lot.
It's a lot, man.
I don't know,
Sheesh.
man. I'm almost ready to call it. I'm almost ready to say like Bad Batch 2, Rebels 3.
Ugh.
Because you just got to think too.
But see, there's
Rewatchability, what's like the favorite, right?
but then yeah, but because then you also have man, the moment when Ahsoka finally realized that Vader was Anakin, and then of course
That was
that
big, yeah.
duel,
Yeah.
that and the whole moment where when Rex was about to fire on Ahsoka and he couldn't, he was fighting against it. That was, sheesh. I don't know, man.
But then on the flip side of that, though, you also have, the turning of Crosshair.
Yeah.
And then, he rejects, and then it's like his slow redemption. And then, of course, his relationship with Omega, which was a really unique thing in Star Wars.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have, what was another one? There was another thing in there, too, that I thought was really compelling. As far as certain relationship stuff.
Even bringing Asajj Ventress back.
Yeah.
That was, a cool thing. Man, it's like I agree with you that Bad Batch. Can we agree to say Bad Batch did more with less?
Yeah, that's actually my point, because it only had
Okay.
3 seasons. And look at everything that it did. And the other thing that I look at is, I mean, if we're talking between these two shows, it's a hair, right? We're not talking big differences here.
True.
However, not only did it do more with less, but I also think that Rebels, as stunningly good as it was, had more weak episodes. Now you could say, well, it also had an extra season, but it just wasn't as concise. And again, I want to reiterate to anybody that wants to just slam me in the comments, I'm not saying that Bad Batch didn't have any weak episodes. I'm just saying that it was, because it had fewer seasons, it had to do more with less.
Okay, so let me just try to do this real quick to help kind of streamline our thoughts here. So, more with less is Bad Batch. Okay, so point for Bad Batch. Now, characters. Who had, which show gave us better characters? And I mean, not just cool, but I mean like their stories, their background, like everything about them. Like what show gave us the better characters?
Well, you can
In
almost
the
make an
arc.
argument either way, because you would be tempted to say Rebels, because there's like a gang of them.
Mhm.
But at the same time, if you really look at the struggles that the Bad Batch had to go through just in self-discovery, right? Like, Hunter had to learn to let go and let Omega do more, much the same way Kanan did with Ezra. But then you also had Crosshair, who came in later in the game and became almost his own father figure to Omega, which of course was tripping out Hunter a little bit. And then, how they had to try to all come back together as a group again. It's almost not just who had the cooler characters. It's like, but who did more with them? Who did like more meaty stuff with them?
But that's what I'm saying. I think I'm going to give the edge in this to Rebels. And here's why. So them, of course, the story with Hera and her father. Um, we also had like the relationship, like the love relationship between Hera and Kanan. You also had you also had Ahsoka, once again joining their group and then trying to, fit in with them, and also dealing with like some of the training, and then of course finding about that whole Anakin Vader thing as aforementioned. But then the other key one is um oh, what is his name? He basically became ah I'm having one of your
I know
moments.
it's horrible. It's horrible. One of these days we'll actually prepare before these shows.
He was a originally he was on the Empire, but then he ended up being
Oh,
um
Fulcrum,
Fulcrum.
which ended up being, I can't remember his actual name. Like,
Yeah, he had the
is another
mutton
real
chop.
easy one. Yeah, the mutton
Yeah,
chops and yeah.
but that whole thing about him defecting and actually helping out, that whole even the whole thing with him and Zeb got stuck in that whole little cave, and that's kind of how he started to see them. Like, he's like, okay, well, maybe you guys aren't as bad as I thought you guys were. Excuse me. So I think that, um, and then of course, Thrawn. Like we get, I just think we got. It's not even just the coolness of the characters, but like what the characters does for the franchise.
But keep
And I
in
think
mind
it.
that it had another full season to do all that too.
Yeah, I get that. But I mean, even if you took that out, I mean, you still had so many characters that had a whole lot of depth to them. I think in
Well, I
Rebels,
mean, you can go where
Bendu. I mean,
Kanan,
you had,
yeah,
like I said,
Kanan was
all that.
training Sabine, and Sabine had her whole little story arc with the dark saber and all that.
Yep, you got
But it
that in
did
there.
also
Yeah,
have the space whales.
yeah.
It did have like a lot of like stupid. I mean, in the beginning, we were like,
But
Ezra
that's
is
what I said.
basically the Star Wars Aladdin, right?
Well, yeah. Then now he's Ace Ventura because he's talking to all these animals. He's
Because
talking.
don't
Oh,
forget, you
the
also had
lost
the
cat.
crosshair thing where he had to come to terms with the fact that, he had that whole like crazy brainwashing thing. And then when he finally came out and came to his senses, he couldn't fire, like he couldn't shoot straight. And that was like
Hmm.
his whole identity. That's why he's called
Right.
Crosshair. So it
Right.
was about him trying to overcome that. I mean, it's tough because again, I do think that you are tempted to go Rebels just because of all the marquee characters that were brought in. And again, it's a hair difference either way, right? Like just depends on which way you're going with it. I mean, it's
Mhm.
oh man,
Okay.
did Rigby just meow? I think he's
Yes.
weighing in.
Yeah. Exactly.
You said Bad Batch. I'm just I mean, it's fine no matter which
uh.
one we do, really. It's just, it's tough.
Okay. What about expanding the world, like the expanding
Well, you can
the
make an argument either way there too, though. Because sure, you have a lot of things that Rebels did as far as expanding the canon, but then you had the whole thing about, the clones' rights to a lot of the, like you said, the whole Project Necromancer. You had, um, oh man, there's just like so much that was in the Bad Batch. Basically, the whole way the world was working, the Republic turning into the Empire.
clones being
Yeah, I
basically
mean,
replaced
just
with
you
the
just had a lot,
stormtrooper.
and the other thing too is it's stuff that we really weren't getting from any other source.
But then you also have like the overlap in Rebels to Episode 3.
Yeah,
That was that was a good one.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
you
wait,
saw,
was that it, or no? I think that was season 7 of the Clone Wars. Yeah, because Rebels takes place long after Episode 3. Yeah, that was season 7 of the Clone
okay, am
Wars.
I getting mixed up? Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
because Rebels takes place like, I don't know, like it ends 3 weeks before Rogue One. It almost overlaps Rogue One.
yeah.
Not quite, but almost. And there was that whole epilogue that it did, at the end that was a post Return of the Jedi that, of course, set up the Ahsoka series and
Mhm.
everything else. I mean, I suppose if you are taking it from a strictly canonical point of view, even though that's going away a little bit because we do have this labeled as our top 5 favorite, not necessarily best or most relevant or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay, well, which one did you have more fun with?
that was tough. That's tough too. What I'm trying to think of is like which one, if I were gonna rewatch them, which one would I go for first?
For me, it would be Rebels.
Yeah, I think so. All right, let's do that.
Yep, there it is.
Let's put Rebels as number 2.
2. And the Bad Batch is number 3.
The Bad Batch is number 3. Hopefully that lines up. All right. We did it.
Not a moment too soon.
Yeah, not a moment too soon. Well, let's just make this official here. Here you go. This is our official list. Number 1, we got the Clone Wars. Number 2, after much deliberation, like a lot of deliberation.
It's like
yeah, we got Rebels.
I think the OJ trials might have been shorter.
Yeah, could have been. Number 3, we got the Bad Batch. Number 4, we have Tales of the Jedi, and number 5, we have Tales of the Empire. And then, of course, the other ones were just not good enough to make our list. So yeah, that's it. You know what? Okay, now let me get a few more comments in here because David has a couple, and then we can wrap this up. So he says, have to say, I'm liking this already. I like the live list. Yeah, I mean, the live list, this is fun, and we're probably going to do this a lot because this is another thing that really, I think, is a good audience participation, even though nobody really chimed in. But at the same time, I think this is something that we can all have a lot of fun with. I think it's something that's a little bit more interesting to see instead of just us talking about the news stuff all the time. So yeah, look for this a lot. A lot. Okay, he goes on to say, of the top 5, who's your favorite director?
Ooh.
Well, I mean,
Well,
Filoni basically
did all of these.
Yeah, I mean,
One guy. So.
yeah,
Dave Filoni.
Yeah, Dave Filoni would be our favorite director out of all of them. I mean, granted, Lucas did a big chunk of the Clone Wars, yeah. But Filoni was right there with them. Filoni created and wrote, directed. I mean, all the series are essentially his. I don't know about the Tales of the Empire and Jedi though. That one might have featured. They might have been, but I don't know if he actually directed them all.
Oh yeah, I think he might have had other people direct.
Yeah, he might have had other people directing those. But still, I mean, look, just for Clone Wars and Rebels alone, Filoni gets it. And Bad Batch. Because again, like Filoni, this is the thing that we were always saying, is that Filoni is really good with animation. He really knows how to write for it. He knows how to direct for it. He knows everything about it. The problem is live action. That's where it gets a little bit crazy for him. He's not good with live action. Not yet, anyway. He's not terrible, but he's not there yet. So yeah, that would be it. All right. So that, hopefully you guys enjoyed that one. That was, of course, our top 5 favorite animated shows. If you guys have a different list, or maybe look, we had all the animated shows on there. I really don't think I don't know. Somebody could maybe make a case for Visions or even Resistance. But by and large, I think the only thing that people might do is maybe reorder the list a little bit. Like, particularly, you saw how hard we were working on number 2 and 3. Maybe other people think the Bad Batch should be number 2. If you do, go ahead and put that in the comments section. Maybe I'll put a poll up or something. It should be a really interesting thing. Look for more lists from us, because I think this is a really cool, like, live ranking thing. I really like doing this. This is a lot of fun. And you can join us again next Sunday, where we'll be talking about something Star Wars related, no doubt. All right, so with that, don't forget to like and subscribe. And, hit the notification bell so you guys know when we're going live. Because our schedule does change. And sometimes, like last night, we didn't end up going live last night. We couldn't do it. But here we are tonight. So if you have the notification bell going, you'll always know when we're on. You'll always know when a show's coming up. Keep an eye on our socials, too. Facebook, X, Instagram. We're at head-to-head-SW, so you can find us there. We also post things there. Our Discord channel is there. All kinds of ways that you guys can stay in touch. So until next Sunday, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at head-to-head-SW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at head-to-head-swpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.